generous with the facts. It was a nice one. Yeah. That's right. How are you? I talked to him. Maybe he was sitting at your table.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Great evening.
Yeah.
Well, your son looks like you and your daughter looks like you.
It's interesting because we get different feedback on who it looks like who these
do?
days. Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Well, I think there are bits and pieces of both of us.
Ooh, now our new employees are here. That's great.
It's fun to listen.
The meeting to order, please. I'd like to welcome all the new employees in the audience. Thanks for joining us this morning. Also want to say this will be Commissioner Carter's last meeting with us. Governor Brown has submitted a list of state board and commission appointments to the Senate, and we expect her nominee for the Port Commission to be confirmed during May legislative days later this month. I know we have very much benefited from Commissioner Carter's service on this commission over many years, and I know Curtis had remarks he wanted to add, so I will let him do that now.
Oh, great. Thank you, Madam President. Jim, I've been saving up here. We thought these comments might come in December, but you very kindly agreed to stay on. For those of you who don't know, Jim has been on the commission since December of 2009 and served as commission president. There you go. There's the 2009 commission photo. Commission president since July 2012. As president, he helped oversee some of the most important activities in port history, including the hiring of a new executive director, one of my favorite achievements for Jim. He was also a strong advocate for proactive engagement on equity and the environment as commission president. He helped us on developing programs and partnerships and policies around equity and environmental performance, and those have done very well. For air travelers at the port, he helped oversee the beginning of nearly $2 billion of improvements at Portland International Airport, which will result in an innovative and flexible airport for future generations. During his tenure, the port continued a really strong focus on new international nonstop passenger service, securing, in his time as chair, new service to Reykjavik, Frankfurt, London, and Mexico City, as well as international air cargo service to Hong Kong. For shippers, Jim helped shape the future of T6 by setting the strategic vision with our team to identify the best ways to offer regional shippers options to move their goods. And it's work, as we all know, that continues to this day, and we're grateful for it. On jobs and commerce, the transformation of a former brownfield in Jim's tenure from a dilapidated brownfield site into a thriving job center has really been transformational out at Troutdale. It's now home to FedEx Ground and a new $200 million Amazon fulfillment center on the way. Jim, for your steadfast leadership, your many accomplishments, and for your friendship, it's now time to roll down the window and let the wind blow back your hair. We thank you very much for your service, and on behalf of all of us, really wish you all the best. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Jim. You
Thank
leave literally and figuratively big shoes to fill. I won't be able to do anything on one of those, but hope to be able to at least do some of the things that you've done so well and so with so much class.
You definitely don't want my shoe size. And thanks for that. I actually, just the short things I would say as in appreciation is it's really that the people on this commission now and previously, I hope that I have helped that group work together well. It seems that it is a functional group, and I appreciate everybody's input and being part of that, and also for all of the staff and employees at both the airport and our various sites of work in the terminals. It's been a pleasure to be part of your day-to-day work, and I've learned a lot about all of you and what you do, and hope you keep doing it. So thank you.
Thanks, Jim. I'd like to call for a motion and second to grab a leave of absence to Commissioner Pierce, who's out of town.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Call for motion and second for approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting of April 11th, 2018.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Curtis will now ask you for the executive director's report, please.
Great. Thank you, Madam President. I'd also like to welcome the new employees. For you guys who are new to the port and in the new class, would you put up your hand just so we can see where you all are? Terrific. Thank you. Welcome. I got to spend a bit of time last week in the early morning hours with this crew, and it's just a great bunch. I hope you all get a chance to meet them. It's also the most diverse class we've had of new employees at the port, and so I'm just really thrilled about that. We look forward to having you all here at the port and look forward to many years of success. I'd also like to recognize Jason Lewis-Berry, who's a special guest here today from the governor's office. Jason is the head of regional solutions and the Jobs and Economy Policy Advisor to the governor, has a background in the State Department and jobs all over the world. He's a great ally of the port at the state level. And Jason, welcome. Really good to have you here. Before we move on to the bulk of my lengthy comments, I'd like to ask Stan to do the safety comments for this morning.
Certainly. Well, today, May 9th, is Safety Break for Oregon Day, and it's an Oregon OSHA-sponsored event. So today, the Port of Portland is joining work sites across the state to celebrate safety and health in our workplace. Our employee safety committees have organized events to engage and involve our employees and to take home to their families conversations about safety and health. Our employees will also be taking another safety break later this month, and currently, I think it started yesterday, to complete their safety perception surveys. This is their opportunity to weigh in and share their thoughts on safety practices, processes, and systems to enable us to advance our safety culture. And I'm on public record that I do want their candid comments and input. The month of May also affords us several month-long safety observances. It happens to be Electrical Safety Month, Building Safety Month, Motorcycle Safety Month, to name a few. However, because it's Portland, I want to speak about National Bike Month. Part of National Bike Month is Bike to Work Week, which starts next week, and Bike to Work Day, which is May 18th. There's also a Port of Portland team supporting an event called May's Bike More Challenge, which serves to get more people into biking. We want them to be safe when they bike and for vehicle drivers to be aware that the volume of bicyclists is going to go way up for this event, and also because of the good weather, will stay high through the summer season. So here are some be safe tips for biking. Mind the signs and signals. Obey stop signs and traffic lights. Be predictable. Ride with the flow of other vehicle traffic. And communication is key. So use hand signals to make drivers aware of your intentions. And be aware. Approach all intersections with caution. And be seen and be safe. So make sure you're wearing protective equipment like bike helmets, bright reflective clothing, and use lights if it's dark outside. And then also keep your senses about you. So make sure that you keep an ear clear and not using earbuds when you're riding your bike. And also remember that pedestrians have the right of way even for cyclists. Curtis, that's my message today.
Great. Thank you, Stan. I'd also like to just draw everyone's attention to our safety champions for the month. Good cross-section of port employees up here from different parts of the business. Thank you, employees, for really focusing on safety. Just one more quick comment about Jim. I'd like to recognize Jim for receiving the 2018 Legal Citizen of the Year Award from the Classroom Law Project, an organization he's spent a fair amount of personal time and energy supporting. He was recognized for being, quote, a lifelong proponent of civic education, longtime supporter and board member of CLP, and an inspiring example of personal commitment to community action. Jim, congratulations. On the air connectivity front, I'd just like to report back to the Commission that we did a visit 2 weeks ago down to Mexico City, celebrating the opening of direct air service to Mexico City with Aeromexico and our partners at Delta. Commissioner Chamberlain and I were able to join a delegation of about 45 people from the region. It's a pretty exciting opportunity. It's a red eye down there, but really opens up Latin America to direct traffic from Mexico City. So we're really hoping to encourage that that connection. And for someone whose first time it was to visit to Mexico City, it's really extraordinary city, massive, 22 million people, and a really exciting place. I think the opportunity to connect Portland to a new food market is a pretty good one. And for those of you who haven't had the fine opportunity to see it, it's a nice opportunity to hear my terrible Spanish. I was able to share with a group of about 250 business partners and customers down in Mexico City. Just a great event. So, Commissioner Chamberlain, thank you for joining us there. The dredge season begins next week. We're actually opening the season this Friday with our traditional pancake breakfast, but the season will open near Astoria on May 14th and work its way upriver over the course of the summer. On May 16th, we'll celebrate International Trade Week here in Oregon. The port will participate again in the 9th annual Celebrate Trade International Business and Scholarship Awards Dinner. It's just a really great event that recognizes the connectivity of foreign markets to Oregon and to Portland. We're also proud that 2 of the awardees at this event are port partners, Aeromexico and Subaru. Over at PDX, we're noting the remodel of the USO Northwest Portland Center. It's a great expanded footprint there. The center expects to serve 5,000 additional service members and their dependents each year at PDX. We had, about a week ago, 300 job seekers attend our PDX job fair. It continues to be a very low unemployment market. Folks here at the airport are actively recruiting. Just spoke with our friend Christian Jolie, who says that they're working very hard to recruit new employees. We had openings a week ago for 100 new full-time, part-time, and seasonal jobs at the airport from more than 30 companies. So it is still hiring season. We're commemorating this month the 70th anniversary of the Vanport flood. We're proud to help sponsor the Vanport Mosaic Festival, May 23rd to 28th. It's really a great event. Those activities seek to remind people in the region about that community, what it represented, and many of the forgotten stories about what took place in that part of town and how it still influences the region today. Congratulations also to our neighbors at Cully Park and Verde for being recipients of the Oregon Business 2018 Oregon Brownfields Award last week. It's a new park adjacent to PDX. It's really a terrific addition to the community created by members of the community. So congratulations to them. And finally, it seems like a morning of congratulations. Congratulations to Commissioner Alexander on his new position at Portland State University, where he's the interim Vice President of Global Diversity and Inclusion. Madam President, that is the end of my comments.
Thank you, Curtis. Like to call for a motion and second to accept the Executive Director's report.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Like to open the meeting for public comment? Anybody? Okay, seeing none, I'll call on Vince Granado to introduce the general discussion item, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. We do have a general discussion item this morning talking about our parking and ground transportation system. And we haven't typically done this in a public forum, but we thought it would be good because there's been so much change in this particular industry. We're investing a lot of capital in the system out there, as you've seen with our rental car quick turnaround area. We're doing a consolidated parking and rental car facility. And so there's just been a lot of dollars invested. And so we do look at the other side of that equation too, which is rates. And it is a system that works together with parking, rental cars, ground transportation, and certainly all the changes with what we call transportation network companies, which is the Lyft and Ubers and such. And so Michael Huggins here is our manager of the Landside program, and Michael's going to walk through a little bit about the system and then some ideas that we've got about changing rates for these various customers.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me present today on our ground transportation system. My goal is to present what our system is, talk about our rates as well as our benefits to our customers. Our ground transportation and parking system, our landside system, includes those facilities for public parking, for employee parking, for ground transportation, for including our whole lot as well as our terminal roadways, and also our public roadways as well. Included within the landside system also is our access via TriMet and our pedestrian and bicycle paths. Users of the airport arrive at the airport in a bunch of different ways, from parking in our facilities to being dropped off on the roadway to riding ground transportation, and also while not on here, we do have a number of users that come to the road via or come to the terminal via bicycles and walking. The numbers are a very small percentage, mostly employees, but there are a few passengers that do take advantage of that. We offer a number of benefits to our customers. We're proud of our offerings and hope that we do have a lot of participants that do take advantage of it. We offer a disabled parking rate, which allows for people with disabilities to park in our short and long-term garage at our economy lot rate. For our disabled veterans of our United States Armed Services, we offer free parking for up to 14 consecutive days in our economy lot. Our economy lot parking discount is for travelers that travel up to a week or so. Their 7th day of parking is free. And close into the terminal, we have motorcycle parking for those users. It's just under the upper roadway at the north end of the baggage claim drive. There's about 150 stalls, and that's free service for motorcycle drivers. And throughout our parking facilities, we have 65 electric charging stations. They are free to the users of those lots. And in our short-term garage, we have level 2, which can charge your car in about 4 hours, and all of the other facilities have level 1 charging throughout the facility. And lastly, we're one of the few airports that does offer a pedestrian and bike walking path, multi-use path, all the way in from the region into the terminal. We offer 3 different parking areas on the roadway system, and for a nominal fee, people can store their bikes with Portland provisions within the terminal. Those that choose not to park with us arrive at the airport in a variety of different ways, from being dropped off on the curbs to riding in ground transportation, including taxis and transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft. We service about 18,000 cars per day on our roadway, which makes us one of the busiest cul-de-sacs in the Northwest. We're proud of the variety of benefits that we offer. A lot of the benefits are directly for our customers, including a reliable busing service for our economy lot, as well as our Alderwood employee lot, which is the main parking facility for our airline, concession, and tenant employees. We offer bus service about every 6 to 8 minutes. We also provide an app, which we introduced just last year, that shows passengers where the buses are on the route, but also shows the next few buses that are arriving at the shelter that they're waiting at. And then while on the bus, each of our customers can take advantage of free Wi-Fi just like they would in the terminal. We are currently in the process of replacing our parking guidance system in our short-term garage. It's hit its end of its useful life, but this new system has a camera-based system which will allow us to provide a better service for those that lose their customers. In the current system, their cars. The current system, we have to wait till the next day because we inventory the cars every night. This will allow us to look up the license plate of that vehicle in short-term garage and tell the customer exactly where it is. We do currently drive around to help the customers find it. But as you know, the parking guidance system is a huge benefit for us and our users because it allows people to go straight to their parking spot in seconds rather than circling around for a couple minutes looking for those spots. The other benefit to us as well is the reduction in the carbon or exhaust fumes from those vehicles circling around. In the next couple of years, we'll be installing new wayfinding signage throughout our line side facilities. This will make the experience more intuitive for our parkers, as well as the roadway users, not only to get into the terminal, but to get back to their parking spaces. And then once Packer, the new parking garage is completed, we'll add 2,400 parking spaces to our long-term inventory, which will allow us to accommodate the parking, which we can't do today as we close 3 to 4 days per week. Our new, in our ground transportation operations, we opened a new hold lot a little over a year ago, and that lot was designed with a lot of user feedback. So not only does it have wider parking spaces, larger drive aisles, a large area which the users actually walk around, we also designed in a facility that allows for it's got an enclosed break room, which they haven't had before, larger restrooms, and then taking their feedback, we had designed in a couple religious accommodations as well, with a foot bath and an area for prayer. In moving forward, once Packer is open and the rental cars move into that facility, we'll be repurposing the short-term garage's first floor to a larger ground transportation plaza, which will be a better experience for all of our customers and users. Inland side, it's very busy out there, and we have a large contract with SP Plus. They have over 210 employees who are represented by the Teamsters, Local 305, and they are within our parking transportation, which is our busing operation, as well as our ground transportation on the roadway. We've worked with them to increase their wages. The starting wage for bus drivers is now $16, and we plan to increase that over time. But also we've reached out to the different communities and trying to bring in, not only promote our frontline staff to bus drivers by paying for their commercial driver's license training, but we're also reaching out to the community. And we have a veteran that's currently employed by us that we're pushing, or he's going through the commercial driver's license process as well, and we're paying for that. Our intent of increasing the wages is really to retain those employees that are here working with us and attract new employees to the airport. Our parking rates are, for an airport of our size, are very reasonable. In 2007, we opened Gold Key Valet because we started construction on the long-term garage below us. It was actually intended as an overflow for our short-term garage, but has been very successful and is very labor-intensive. As you know, customers can drop off on the roadway. Their car's waiting for them when they get back, but we need to shuttle that car off-site to make sure that we have capacity for our newer customers. Our short and long-term garage rates changed about 4 years ago, and our economy lot rate last changed 9 years ago. And that rate, when we went from $8 to $10, our off-site competitors also immediately went to $9.95 and have since all gone to $12. Our employee parking lot rate changed in April of 2010. That helps us recover the cost of the additional buses. We have a fleet of 24 compressed natural gas buses providing that service. But we also increased or improved amenities out there. We've gone to LED lighting. We have new shelters. It's a really nice facility on Alderwood. The goal of our program is to balance the use of these different facilities, meet our customers' expectations, but ultimately optimize our revenue, cover the cost of operating these facilities, and fund our current and future capital programs. We're not proposing a change to the hourly rate. The hourly rates remains low and is a good attraction for those customers that go to the roadway. As you know, during peak hours, it's congested. Coming into the garage is easy to find a space, and hopefully they'll get into the airport and enjoy our concession program as well. Our daily rate proposal is to change the valet parking rate from 30 to 35. And not change our short-term rate, but change our long-term rate to $24 from $21. This will help us balance the two facilities close in, and hopefully we'll be able to reduce the number of days that we're closed in the long term. Our economy lot rate, we're proposing a change from $10 to $12, and we're not proposing a change at all to our employee lot rate. Employees of the airport rely on our service. We need to make sure that it remains affordable to them as well. A majority of our ground transportation rates last changed in 2010. In 2015, we introduced the rate for the transportation network companies, Uber, Lyft, and Wings, when they started servicing the airport. These are their per trip fees. They currently pay $250 per trip for taxis and all other operators. Our charter buses pay $15 per trip, and our TNCs pay for $2 to pick up, $2 to drop off. I'm sorry. They do. They only pay to pick up their customers, and partly because not every taxi company is permitted with the airport, so it would be unfair for us to charge just those ones permitted with us, and those that are outlying communities like Orange Taxi in Beaverton doesn't pick up customers here. They primarily serve their community. Similarly, our rate objective here is to make sure that we're balancing the mode split between each of the operators and parking, cover our operating costs as well as our capital costs for current and future, and then meet the operator and customer expectations for the user fees of the airport. Our proposal is to change the per trip fee. Our transportation network companies do pay a pickup and drop off, but all other operators pay a permit fee, as well as the TNCs. They pay a $200 permit fee, but the other operators all pay a per vehicle fee. The TNC fleet's over 7,000 vehicles, and it would be difficult for us to permit each of those vehicles independently. We rely on the city's requirements for inspection and customer service training for each of those operators. And our charter bus fee at $15, we're proposing a $5 increase to $20 as they take up the large majority of the space on the terminal roadways as well as in the hold lot, and their customer demand on our roadway is higher as well. So I want to thank you today for allowing me to talk about the transportation system and parking systems that we have here, and I welcome any questions or feedback you have.
So do you have comparison numbers for other airports, like West Coast airports or similar sized airports, for mass transit use? I noticed the number up here is 5%, I think, for max.
We do. I don't readily have them on me right now. We actually have a pretty good number compared to other airports. I think the number gets up to closer to 7% as well. A large majority of those people that ride the TriMet facilities are employees of the airport as well.
Right.
We are improving the service, which will help increase those numbers. TriMet's proposing 24-hour service, and the off hours they'll be providing buses, but also an additional run in the morning and in the evening is going to help as well.
I'm thinking mostly about max at this point for travelers. And I think I know about the bus increase for employees, and I think that's great. But the second part of that question is, what are we committing to in terms of funding to evaluate why we don't have more max users, since it's a great downtown service at least, and just in anticipating where our next capital investments are, seems to me that's a major spot of investment potentially. If in fact it shows that investment improves ridership. But I'd just like to keep that on your radar for future purposes.
We are participating with TriMet on their improvements that they're making region-wide. And one of the limiting, as far as their schedule, one of the limiting factors is the single track that we have here at the airport. So part of their expansion is to double track this section, which will allow them to provide greater service not only at the airport, but throughout the community. And I think that will also increase ridership as well.
Okay, thanks.
Please.
I may have missed it, but I saw on there where the employee parking is $35. Does that include port employees and employees who work inside the terminal, or is it just port employees?
The Alderwood employee lot primarily serves the airlines, tenant, and concession staffs, and that is a monthly fee. Most of it's paid for by the different companies. Some are paid individually, and some are reimbursed. But it is primarily for the airport customers or airport employees. There are a few port employees that park in that lot as well. Most of the HQ employee parkers park right here in the surface lot just outside.
And is there an incentive to, following up on Jim's question, is there an incentive for people to ride the max employees of the airport? Do they get?
Yes, we've worked with the airport community. We actually have a program that we've negotiated with TriMet that allows airline or concessionaires and tenants to participate in a program that I think the total cost is $100 for the annual permit or TriMet pass, and I think in some cases employees are paying half or less than that.
Thank you.
I have a question, which is really a sort of a future-looking question about how we're looking at the possibilities of changes in the transportation system beyond the MAX. So, for example, autonomous vehicles, or possibly changes in how TNC companies work to the extent that folks are deemed to be employees of those companies, and maybe they have fewer drivers coming to the airport. Just wondering how you guys are thinking about that in terms of your planning.
In designing Packer, we've built in flexibility within that facility with helixes and ramps going into and out of the 3rd and 4th floors, which allows us to expand either rental cars up or parking down or ground transportation services into those facilities as well. As far as the conversation about TNC staff we haven't really been involved in that. For the most part, our structure is set that we're collecting the fees directly from the customers. So the fees that are paid by the users to the TNCs are between the employees and the companies themselves. We are paying attention to it. Like our hold lot is one of a kind as far as there's no other facility in the region that allows for transportation network companies or ground transportation operators to park, have a break, without being pushed along the curbs downtown or somewhere else. So we value them as an employee base. We also value the ground transportation operators as a relief valve for our congested facilities, and we work closely with them, meeting often. We participate with the city's board downtown, but we also meet with all the operators and owners here every other month at the least, to talk about changes and opportunities for us to improve their experience.
But I guess I'd also, we've spent a lot of time talking about the future of this, right? This was an industry that is being disrupted. And our timeline on infrastructure is long, and we build big things and they last a long time. And so there's been a lot of question in the entire airport industry about should you continue to invest in parking garages and consolidated rental car facilities. Right? It's all over the place. I just read an article on it yesterday. And what we have seen is and what our plan has been to do is just really to try to create flexible facilities to be able to use in a different form. 10 years from now, the mode of travel may be very different than what it is today. We still think that cars are going to be used in some form, given when you look at what our geography is versus a more central urban core airport. Our geography, we pull a lot of people in from long distances. We think there's still going to be some kind of a car. It might not be a rental car. We might not own it. You might not own it, but somebody's going to own the car. And where's it going to go? Somewhere at the end of the day. The philosophy of the rental cars, as we've been talking to them, is look, we're investing. We're going to have a car, and we're going to need some place to keep it. And the airport seems like a really good place. So as we've been negotiating with them and our rental car facility here, right, we're doing a 20-year deal with them, and the quick turnaround area is big fuel wash area, but it's fully leased for 20 years. The airlines are the rental cars are investing in that, so they see themselves as a player here. So for us, as we've done the design of these things, and is really to try to figure out and just keep them as flexible as possible, so that we can move players over time, depending on how the market changes. But it's something that we continue to watch. But we still think the infrastructure is going to be needed at some point in time and in some form.
Any further comments or questions on this item? Thank you, Vince.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
I'll ask if any commissioner wants a presentation on the consent item. Hearing none, the consent item is intergovernmental agreement, State of Oregon, Department of Transportation, and City of Portland Rivergate Crossing. Call for a motion and second for the consent item.
So move.
Second.
Any further comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Up next is the public hearing for the Port's FY 18-19 budget. The Board of Commissioners will be in recess briefly, and the Port of Portland Budget Committee is called to order. Our first order of business is to elect a chair of the Budget Committee. As Commission President, I'd be happy to serve as chair of the Budget Committee unless anyone objects. Any objections to that?
None.
Hearing none, would someone please make a motion that I serve as chair?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. I'll now open the public hearing. We'll first hear from staff and then open the public hearing for any comments from the public. And I'll call on Cindy Nickel to introduce the budget item.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Today we're kicking off the FY 18-19 budget for the port, consistent with state local budget law. And so as we just heard, the commission will be acting as the port's budget committee and will receive the proposed budget. Following the discussion of the proposed budget, we'll have public comment and questions, and then that will be followed by a request for your approval to submit our budget to the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission, or TSCC. On June 13th, we'll then have, right after the regular commission meeting, we'll have a public hearing that will be held here by the TSCC. Many of you have attended that in the past. And then on June 29th, at a special commission meeting, we will request that the commission adopt the FY 18-19 budget. Suzanne Kenny, who's our Director of Budget, Financial Planning and Analysis, is here to present this.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Cindy. So we will go through the port's fiscal 18-19 budget. As you're all aware, our strategic and business plans directly influence the development of our budget, so we'll briefly touch on that. And I also wanted to just point out that this budget is a funding plan for actions that have been approved by the Commission previously, and for planning purposes, anticipated actions or initiatives that may require further Commission review and approval prior to implementation. So as in past various contracts that require your action and approval will be brought to you. Just because it's included in the budget doesn't automatically mean that that step is bypassed. This budget also reflects the organizational changes that have been implemented over the past year, particularly in the areas of administration, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Whoops. So just briefly here, touching on our strategic plan, reminding you of the three main areas of focus: building an airport for the future, revitalizing our marine business, and leveraging the port's strengths to create a more equitable and prosperous region. And then overlaid here, our budget also includes our guiding principles and our values. And as far as the assumptions go for our 19 budget, we are planning for and anticipating continued growth across most business lines. The focus continues to enhance the region's connections to the national and global markets, as well as focusing on asset maintenance and efficiency improvements. As far as healthcare costs, we continue to focus on our wellness program and work with our insurance providers, and we're pleased to maintain the growth of those costs to be less than 5% for fiscal year 19. You'll also see throughout the budget the impacts of our PDX Next program and the capital associated with that, as well as continued focus on our general fund sustainability. Working to implement the multi-use business model at Terminal 6 that came out of the Industry Leader Committee and their recommendations there. You see that reflected in our 19 budget. And we continue to focus on our industrial land development to ensure that those properties are ready when customers are in need of purchasing property. And certainly last but not least, focus on cost control and maintaining competitive rates for our customers. So we'll start with the operating budget, and we'll go over the volumes for our various lines of business as those do drive and influence our budget. We'll start with the general fund and marine first. For our autos lines of business, we're looking at about a 1% increase next year, about 4,000 additional autos over our adopted budget for 18. That's primarily driven by Toyota and AWC with the Ford exports. For our break bulk line of business, what we're budgeting for in 19 is really just activity on the Swire ships. For fiscal year 18, we had anticipated activity at Terminal 2, and that activity has been very quiet, and we're not anticipating a change there in 19. So really, the breakbulk activity for 19 will be the Swire cargo. Grain, we are continuing to see improvement or growth there, and for 19, we're looking at about a 12% increase over our 18 budget, and the same for mineral bulk, continuing to see strong volumes both for potash and soda ash in those facilities following expansion out there. And then for our intermodal rail activity with BN, you'll see we're planning for about 41,600 container moves on the rail up and down the Puget Sound area. For our industrial land sales, we're looking at a budget of about $11.5 million in land sales. Our inventory has been decreasing the last couple of years. You've no doubt recall several land sales that have occurred, and so as that inventory comes down, there's less land available for sale. So we're looking at about $11.5 million for next year. Dredging days, that is driven by the Army Corps of Engineers, and our budget for 19 has been developed around almost 160 dredging days. You'll see that reflected in the budget. And for PDX, we're looking at a passenger increase of about 3%. That's 1 million total passengers over what we had planned for fiscal year 18, just shy of 20 million. If things continue well, we very easily could break that 20 million mark in fiscal year 19. And landed weight there, you see about a 7% increase, about 12.6 million pounds of landed weight. Most of that is being driven by additional cargo service, primarily driven by the continued increase in e-commerce. So we'll start with the operating revenues with the general fund there at the top. For marine, you can see we're planning for about a 49 or 45% increase, about $9.4 million in additional revenue. That's really driven by the additional activity there at Terminal 6 with BN and Swire. Industrial development, excluding the land sales, you can see we're forecasting an increase of about 13%. We've got some additional leases there, particularly the Amazon Fulfillment Center in Rivergate, that's primarily driving that increase for industrial development. There you see the land sale proceeds that we're budgeting for fiscal year 19. And overall total marine industrial development revenues up about 0.5%. If you exclude the land sales, we're actually up 10 million on about 38%. Navigation there, moving to the middle, there you see the reflection of those additional dredging days. For general aviation, you see a little bit of a decrease. That's primarily a result of the master plan winding down out there in fiscal year 19. We did receive some grants in support of that effort in fiscal year 18. That obviously would not continue into 19 as we wrap that up. So that's really what's behind the forecast and revenues being down for GA. Moving then on to aviation, you can see we're actually forecasting airline revenues to be down a little over $2 million. Keep in mind that's a good thing, given the residual nature of our airline agreement. Airline revenues are driven by the expenses here at the airport. So to the extent we can keep those expenses down for the airlines, that keeps their costs down, which in turn means they pay us lower revenues. But that's a good thing. It helps promote additional air service, and in the long run, we all benefit. The airline or the revenues right below the airline revenues there, those are the ones that we do want to increase, and you can see that things continue to forecast to go well at PDX with terminal concessions, parking, the rental car, GTO, ground transportation network revenues all forecast to be up. And I did want to point out that the revenues here in the 19 budget do reflect the parking rate increase that Michael just discussed here this morning. So total port revenues, forecast to increase about 10 million, a little over 3% if you exclude the land sales. Again, just kind of to isolate some of the volatility that those can drive. We're looking at an increase of just under 20 million and about 7%. So for the operating expenses, there you can see the forecast breakdown by the operating areas, with PDX up about 4.2%. Most of that is really driven by the increase in activity here at the airport, primarily on the terminal side, the additional passengers. It's resulting in more frequent janitorial, cleaning services, elevator, escalator maintenance, that type of expense increase. GA, again, with the master plan winding down, seeing a little bit lower expense budgeted there for 19. Marine, that's really a result of the Terminal 6 activity. Obviously, higher activity results in higher longshore labor, but we did see the higher revenues associated with that activity on the prior slide. Industrial development, with the lower land sales there, there's less costs associated with that and the due diligence, and it does also include that particular line includes our cost of property. Navigation, obviously higher dredging days, higher costs there, and environmental forecasting to be down a little bit for fiscal year 19. So excluding our environmental accruals, our cost of property, we're looking at total operating expenses up about 11 million, about 6%. Those operating departments up above do include our support services, and just highlighted that on the bottom line there. Our overall support services budget for 19 is expected to actually go down about 300,000. We are a service oriented organization, which results in a number of staff people. About half of our operating budget is salaries, wages, and benefits. So we do keep a close eye on our FTEs. For fiscal year 19, you can see we are planning for an increase of a little over 21 positions. If you include navigation, that flexes up and down depending on the number of dredging days. That's about a 3% increase. And I would say this is probably the largest increase in the last, 10 to 15 years. And it's really driven by the increase in activity here at the airport, both on the operations side as well as capital. This is the largest capital program the port has undertaken ever, and we're starting to gear up and plan for that. So you do see the increase there for PDX as well as engineering, again, in support of the airport operations and capital program. Other than that, there's pretty much been reductions kind of across the board. In some areas, we have transferred folks to PDX, particularly in the environmental operations area. There's just been more focus and attention at PDX and less in the industrial development and marine area. So we've been able to utilize some of those folks in meeting the need on PDX. So some of the decreases in marine and industrial development have actually shifted over to meet the need over at PDX. Also in PDX, really focusing on increased public safety and security. So we've been planning for additional positions in that area as well. And I should have pointed out, we do have a couple of additional maintenance folks planned for PDX in support of some of the newer facilities, in particular the QTA that's online now. So the costs associated with those positions, you can see we're forecasting to be up about $4.5 million. That's a little over 4%, and you can see that the benefits associated with our personal services are pretty much right in line with the overall salary increases. We're fortunate that in fiscal year 19, that is the second year of a PERS rate. So you see that the PERS number there is reasonable compared to 18. Unless things drastically change within the next year, I am anticipating a much larger increase in that PERS line for fiscal year 20. For the general fund, this is really just putting the pieces together here to give an overall kind of profit and loss look. This is combining the revenues that we talked about earlier with the expenses for the general fund. So I'll just focus on the bottom line there. The operating income before depreciation for fiscal year 19, we're looking at about almost $3 million. That's about $5.2 million improvement over the fiscal year 18 budget. Excluding GA, navigation, land sales, really isolating the marine and industrial development portions of our general fund, we're looking at an increase or OIBD of about $1.2 million, which is about $4.8 million better than our 18 budget. This is the direction that we want to head, but we know we still have work to do, in particular, the general fund sustainability. So we're encouraged by the activities in the general fund, but just to let you know, we continue to work on that, and we know we still have work ahead of us in that area. For PDX then, this slide shows some of our key indicators up at the top there. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of our rates, particularly, or our revenues, particularly with the airlines, are driven by our operating expenses. There you can see total operating expenses for PDX, increase of about $5.6 million, a little over 4%. You see the breakdown then between the airfield and the terminal, which again I mentioned earlier about the activity in the terminal just requiring more resources with the added passengers traveling through there. For fiscal year 19, we actually have some older debt, Series 21B, that is paid off. So we're getting a little bit of break on our debt service and coverage before we get into this large capital program that starts coming online and in the rate base. So we're down a little over $3 million in debt service and coverage. And our terminal concessions up about $743,000. The next section there just highlights the volumes we talked about earlier. So the bottom section, what does this mean as far as our metrics that we keep an eye on for PDX? Cost per plane passenger for fiscal year 19, we're looking at $9.33. It's about 74 cents lower than our adopted budget for 18. Again, that's a good thing. We want the cost on a per passenger basis as low as possible. I think this is probably going to be the last year we'll see single digits ever. I think that will be in our rearview mirror. So I've been, my message to folks has been enjoy it while it's here, because once we have these large capital assets online and in the rate base, that number is going up. The landing fee, we're looking at $3.08. I'm hopeful that by the end of the year there'll be some additional flights that we're not aware of. We haven't actually factored into the budget that actually bring us down under $3. That would just be fabulous if we could have a landing fee under $3. We haven't had that in over a decade. In fact, the cost per in-plane passenger is the lowest in almost 20 years. The last time we were, I think, 2001, we were, I think, like $750. So this is these indicators have been pretty exciting as we've developed the budget. And just real quickly to give you a feel for PDX FTEs and positions relative to the passenger volumes that we've been seeing. You heard me talk about just trying to keep up with the growth out there. Here you can really see, what has happened over the years and how we've really tried to hold our FTEs flat, but it's just getting to the point where we've got to add positions to support the capital program and activity in the terminal. Shifting now to capital. For the general fund, our large capital projects that we're planning for include some work on the dredge, some additional work out in Trip. Again, make sure those properties are ready for sale. Some work out at Hillsborough and our marine terminals. Here you can see the future projects that we have in our system for planning purposes. Those will be undertaken as the business case arises. So the timing and the dollar amount on some of those projects is always subject to change, but we do keep a close eye on that and use that for our planning purposes. The next slide is the same information, but on the same scale as the PDX Capital, which is the next slide, just to kind of give you a feel for the order of magnitude here of PDX compared to the general fund. So for PDX, the capital we have in the plan, no surprise, the consolidated rental car facility you heard talked about earlier, terminal balancing, the terminal core, loading bridges. Again, a lot of work in the terminal. Over the last decade, we've invested a lot of time and resources in the airfield. The airfield's in really good shape. Now with the passenger growth we've seen over the last 8 years, it's time to focus on the terminal, and you've heard a lot about that, and you see that reflected in the budget for 19. Again, for planning purposes, we've got the forecast out for PDX, and for PDX, in a lot of cases, those are projects that we're committed to, and we're on track to get those assets completed and up and running. So that really concludes the review of the budget. This slide just kind of recaps the calendar that Cindy went over in her introduction, and at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from commissioners? Is there anyone here who has any comments or questions with respect to the port's budget? Seeing none, I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the FY 18-19 budget and approval for the budget officer to submit the budget document to the TSCC.
So move.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll close the public hearing. Port of Portland Budget Committee is adjourned, and the board commission meeting is called back to order. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Call Vince to introduce the next agenda item, please.
Morning. The first item we have here is for a collective bargaining agreement with our parking control representatives. We have 13 of them, and we have a 2-year, really a rollover of the old agreement. So I'll let Blaze go through the details of it, though.
Thank you, Vince. Good morning. I want to go over the brief highlights of a 2-year, as Vince said, essentially a rollover or extension of the previous agreement. We realized very early on in the 2 negotiation sessions we had that both parties had interest in a short-term agreement without a lot of changes, essentially. We have an increase in wages, 7/1/2018, 3.6. That number was the number reported, as you might remember, the last CPIW second half index, the Portland-Salem index, that all of the unions had been on in the bargaining agreements, but that index was eliminated last year by the U.S. Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics. So many jurisdictions are looking for replacement indices, and one of the ones that we came upon that we think is going to work well and better than the all cities default under PECBA is the West size Class A second half index. Tends to follow the one we had quite closely. So this will allow for the transition to that index in the second year with a minimum of 2% to a max of 4%. One of the other areas that we looked at that both parties had an interest in, there was no opt-out language in this contract previously for individuals who wish to opt out upon being newly hired or at the point of open enrollment. And so that language, which is in a lot of our other agreements, we agreed to add in this agreement. The first year anticipated impact in terms of new dollars is $41,685. The second year, somewhat more conservative estimates in terms of increases in healthcare. Kaiser's been reported and was very different over the last couple of years. So we're allowing for that. So any savings there, those numbers would be even better. But it also incorporates the anticipated increase in PERS that we've heard so much about, a 4.5% increase in there. So that's really the movers behind that second year increase there, with total new money over the life of the CBA of $138,542 estimated. On the executive director recommendation, approval to enter into a 2-year CBA with AFSCME on this contract.
As president of the Oregon AFL-CIO, which Local 3220 American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees is a member, and as my daughter is the executive director of Oregon AFSCME Council 75, both my daughter and I have an interest in any action that affects Local 3220. The action item related to the collective bargaining agreement between the port and Local 3220 will provide no direct benefit to my daughter or myself. Therefore, I'm declaring a potential but not actual conflict of interest. I will participate in discussion and the vote.
I just have one question, and it's about the length of the contract. It's 2 years, and some of the others have been longer. I'm wondering the reason behind that.
Yes, we try to stagger them just in terms of workload for the same people, same financial analysts coming up, and our benefits folks as well. And prior to this last one, we had a 3-year agreement. We had a 2-year extension prior to that, and that's primarily why we're doing it, to stagger so that there's not more than 3 contracts that are expiring in any given year. It allows us to give greater attention to the individual agreements.
Any other questions from the commission? Hearing none, I'll call for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on this item? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vince, you have the next agenda item?
So we're at a pretty big milestone now with the Terminal Core project. We've been amending the contract with GGF on the design. We're probably close to, what, 30, maybe 30%? 25% now on design. And we're ready to bring on a CMGC, a construction manager and a general contractor for the Terminal Core project. And that's what George is here for some pre-construction services. And again, you've seen this slide before of all the different projects. Obviously, the big one is the Terminal Core. And as we're now starting to get into more and more of that detailed work, it's really useful for us to get the CMGC on board, because now we're really talking about some of the elements of the project and the construction. We really need their insights onto it. So, as you know, we're going to build the 180-foot extension out into the alley. It's called the western expansion of the terminal building, and then we obviously have the A and B work as well. And so, how we start to integrate the project, it's really critical that we have the contractor on board for that. So George is here and is going to talk about the process that we went through, and then a recommendation to request your approval for the CMGC.
Thank you, Vince. Good morning, everyone. And Curtis, thank you very much for the reference to Thunder Road. I appreciate it. If everyone else doesn't, that's okay. So the Terminal Core project will construct about a 180-foot addition to the west of the existing food court area. We'll relocate the security checkpoints back into that area, relocate the concession nodes that are currently post security at the intersections of the concourses further back into the western expansion. We'll design the entire project as well as construct a roof over the new western expansion, as well as the existing ticket lobby. And then at the end of the day, reorient ticketing about 90 degrees from where it is today to make a very intuitive wayfinding experience for the passengers. Last November, the airlines approved phase 1 of the project. Phase 1 includes the construction of the western expansion, the roof over the terminal, the design of the entire project, as well as the Concourse B renovations. The first portion of the project will be the renovation of our ground load facility and the remodel of Concourse B. This will include the eventual demolition of Concourse A, and then the area where Concourse A and further down the ramp will be developed for remain overnight parking. This rendering is a conceptual level look at Concourse B, which comes off at an angle from the existing area. It will include about 6 ground load gates in a 2-story glass enclosed concourse. Significant improvement in the passenger experience from Concourse A, which is shown down here in the lower right-hand quadrant in red. One of our goals with bringing the construction manager on board early is to help develop the phasing plans on constructing this, because during the construction of Concourse B and the renovation, we have to maintain Concourse A operations. So that'll be one of the key aspects of this early phase of the project. Overall project scope for TCOR will improve the seismic resiliency of our terminal complex. The Concourse B and western expansion will be built to today's standards. We'll be removing the most vulnerable aspects of the existing terminal with the roof and the mezzanine removal there. We'll increase our capacity and our flexibility at both the security checkpoints as well as ticketing. With security being moved back into the western expansion, it will no longer be geographically limited as it is today with shear walls and restrooms. We'll also have the opportunity to put in the newer security lanes that are put in a number of the major hub airports. This project will increase our environmental efficiency. We're adding approximately 250,000 square foot of space with the western expansion, and we'll be doing it with no increase in our total energy usage. Bringing the Hoffman-Skanska team on board will provide a lot of opportunity for equity and diversity, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later and how they're going to do that. And certainly the removal of Concourse A will improve our customer experience. So last December, Commission approved the exemption from competitive bidding to allow us to go out for a RFP for CMGC project. We did an outreach over the last year to 15 or so firms to gauge their interest in the project. There were a lot of interest in the project, but we expected a relatively limited response to the RFP due to its size of the project and the complexity. It's required from these firms that we really get their A team. And this isn't just a standard terminal building that is built in a greenfield facility. So it requires really top of the line firms and teams. This project, as a public agency, requires a performance and payment bond, which will lock up a lot of the aspects for some of these firms for years to come. And then just the overall economy and the amount of work going on in this country for airport work really limit the teams that could propose on the project. And we heard from teams who were very interested in proposing, but just didn't have the teams to do it. So ultimately, we had 4 firms responded as 2 joint ventures, Hoffman-Skanska and Mortensen McCarthy. Port staff reviewed these proposals and scored the teams based upon their management experience, their project experience, overall small business plans, project approach, cost, and their safety structure. We ultimately scored the Hoffman-Skanska team first. They had a real strong history here at the airport, from terminal expansion south through the baggage system. Some of their key project project managers and engineers worked on the baggage system, terminal expansion south, headquarters building, and others. They have a really good understanding of the project complexities and the difficulties in constructing and around an operating terminal. They understand the safety aspects of how do we construct this project while maintaining about 20 million annual passengers going through it. They also came up with some pretty creative ideas in their proposal that we're already considering in the project design to reduce the overall cost and the impacts to the operations. This team has pretty strong ideas to increase the small business opportunity, do a lot of outreach to the community, and they have a real strong level of experience working with the port and meeting and exceeding their goals on small business over the past 15 to 20 years. And the Hoffman-Skanska team was also the lowest cost proposer, both in their fee and their anticipated general conditions. So overall schedule, we were here last month to talk about the amendment to the ZGF contract. In this case, we will be requesting approval of the pre-construction services for the Hoffman-Skanska team. This contract today is the entire contract. Although we're only awarding the pre-construction service today, we would have negotiated all terms and conditions for all future contract terms. We anticipate being back towards the end of this year for the first construction guarantee maximum price, which will be for the Concourse B work, and then towards the middle next year for the entire project. Construction will begin early 2019 with some of the renovations for the existing building for the Concourse B work. Concourse B itself will start mid-2019, and we anticipate that being done mid-2020, and then the main T-Core project will kick off around the end of 2019 or early 2020. This contract is for today just pre-construction support services. So what that really entails over the next 15 months or so will be cost estimating, constructability reviews of the design, value engineering proposals, outreach to the subcontracting community, outreach and development of the equity and small business goals. And the intent is that will be complete as we kick off construction. Overall project budget, as we presented to airlines, is about $1.4 billion. This phase one was approved at about $950 million, and our intent is to do as much as we can for the $950 before we have to go back for any additional funding. While we have not established a firm small business participation goal for construction, the Hoffman-Skanska team has committed to at least a 20% goal going forward. And we'll be working very closely with them to hopefully push that even further. It's difficult at this point until we really figure out all the subcontractor packages to figure out what that exact number will need to be. But as I said earlier, this team has exceeded their goals on past projects. I think this building was around 35% or so. Some of the other ones have been above 20%. Staff request approval of the executive director recommendation.
Sorry, there was a moment of silence over the number of zeros in that last slide.
Yes.
I think we all want to take into account that while we're looking at a contract for $5 million, we're really sort of looking ahead at a large expenditure on behalf of the port over a number of years, and I think we want to take that quite seriously. And it looks like you have in terms of looking at who's available to perform the work on behalf of the port. So while we all take a deep breath, any questions from Commission?
I did have a question and comment. One more comment. First of all, appreciate the opportunity that is presented when you begin to bring together partners in a joint venture like this. It really does allow people to bring what they do best to that, and I'm sure there are economy of scales and other things that would benefit the port. I also am encouraged by some of the activities within the pre-construction that target outreach to small businesses to determine how strong that partnership would be. The other opportunity I think it offers is to look at who's had a stronger performance in that area. Because even though both of these firms have a record, I would argue one has a much better record. And I would hope that we would look to that higher threshold of past performance than maybe the lower threshold.
Yes.
And I think it gives us a real chance to begin to look at what the contracting opportunities for small and minority businesses will look like going further and further into this project. This is the gateway, but in many instances, the targets that we set and the performance that we demonstrate are going to govern the additional contracts in that bigger number that we talked about. So I'm pleased to see these targeted outreach efforts as the front end, and hope that we would encourage both partners to sort of bring their A effort forward in the same way that we're asking them to bring their A team forward.
Thank you.
I had a follow-up question on two of your bullets on the relocation and reconstruction of the post-security concession nodes to the west and extending the Concourse B, well, demolishing Concourse A. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you anticipate as the passenger experience during that, because we are one of the highly rated airports, and construction is often a time when obviously passenger flow will be disrupted. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about what considerations are being given to that.
Yeah. Part of the issue with going down to Concourse A is just going to be the physical geography of where we are coming from B going down through A. So I think, and we'll work with the team on the right way to do it, but it will have to be some type of tunnel approach on the ground that is covered and protected. But we will roll in as a part of that, whether it is art, whether it is pictures on the wall, whether it's openings in the windows for people to see the construction activity, to try to at least improve that and improve the passenger experience as much as we can. But it's a little hard in that area just because the geography of not having the construction going through or having the passengers going through a construction site. But we have to make sure we keep them safe. When it comes to the nodes, that's one of the ideas that the Hoffman-Skansik team came up with, is there's an option to build around the existing nodes, similar to what we did on the Terminal Expansion South project when we built the new concourse and extended the passengers, gave them a pathway outside of the construction site while we did the construction. I think that'll be the simplest and easiest way to do that, but we'll have to work through a lot of those details with the team. The team will really be challenged overall in that how do we keep our high ratings during this construction. I've already told them my expectation is that we're not dropping our ratings down as we go through this. So we need to work closely with the community, with the team, with our public outreach committees. Is it paintings on the wall? It's access. Is make it as an interesting place as we go through while we have the disruption, because we know it'll be disruptive.
I think that's good to hear, George, because that's really the standard that we've set. If we start at the very top of it, we're expecting to keep the same standards that we have of quality service, quality passenger experience. It's going to be different. Change is hard for folks as we get into areas, and there will be limitations, but it's really at the top of our mind of ensuring how do we still meet all of the needs of the passengers. I would expect there'll be more folks on the ground helping direct people. I would expect there'll be pop-up concessions in spots too as well, and our existing concessionaires are always happy to do that. So we'll be looking across all the different suites of opportunities that there are for us to continue to provide the great experience that people are used to here. But it's not going to be easy, and it will cost us some money, but in our mind, at the end of the day, it's going to be worth it as part of that process.
Thank you. I think I'll be mindful that the airport has a great economic impact on the region, and this project will certainly up that significantly. So with that, I will call for a motion and second to approve the executive director's recommendation.
Second.
Any further?
Aye.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I didn't mean to get ahead of you, Madam
That's
President.
all right.
Eager to spend that money.
Thank you. It sounds like we passed the resolution.
Thanks, George.
Thanks. Vince, you have the final agenda item.
Yes, we're here for a public improvement contract to install the airfield lighting components. We were here a month or so ago on the procurement, and now we're here for the installation contract for the surface movement guide and control system upgrade.
Thank you, Vince, and good morning. So today I'm here to request approval of a construction contract to Covico for the North Runway Circuit Replacement, the LED and SMIGS upgrade project, in the amount of a little over $1.1 million. This slide may look familiar to you. As Vince mentioned, I was here a couple months ago in order to get a pre-purchase equipment contract for the lighting, and so this is actually for the installation of those lighting units. Again, we are going to be rewiring the north runway, putting new centerline edge lighting out there. As you can see, it's a large location of taxiway edge lighting. We're going to do stop bars, and as well as our surface movement and guidance control system. This photo just shows a few of those elements that we will be doing as part of this project. And this is the overall schedule. The item bolded on your left is action item before you today, and it should be completed by the early part of next year. Again, the construction contract before you today, the equipment contract is the one that you already approved a few months ago. Port staff and contracted services, that's for inspection, the engineering that was done in-house, testing, things of that nature. And the contingency on this project is 5%, which is appropriate given the complexity. And it is funded out of our airline cost center. Our small business manager did a review analysis, excuse me, I should say, on the small business portion and did not find a small business that could perform this work. Staff requests approval of executive director's recommendation.
Comments or questions?
I have one question. I know this is a repeat topic, but on the small business, if you could go back to that 0.
That one?
I'm just wondering if whenever we have a question, we have a small business enterprise participation goal and we have a 0% result. I understand all the complexities of, there are times when the applicants are just not available for many different reasons. Mm-hmm. Is it possible, can you please take into consideration how we could think forward on this so we're not sitting here in 2 or 3 years with at least the zeros in the same areas? What are the lessons we can learn from this particular, or what are the lessons you learned from this particular endeavor that we could use to change the outcome next time?
Do you want me to speak on that?
Yes.
And then also, I believe Kimberly's here, our small business manager, and she can jump in. I think the areas, the airfield lighting is getting training for folks, the electrical folks, into that particular area, and that might boost up that opportunity as I see it. Kimberly, if you want to elaborate.
Chime in?
Mm-hmm.
The bonding requirements to do runway work are substantially higher than traditional work, so that greatly limits our pool of small businesses that are available to do that work. I did a search. There was only one company in the region that performed runway lighting, and they were in Washington. And so there was no availability. It's a one scope project. There was no trucking or flagging or anything else that went with it. It was just the installation. And when you have the high bonding requirements for airfield work, we're always going to have difficulty getting small business participation if there's only one scope.
Okay, so then I guess the question would then be, looking forward in we'll have more of this type of work, or maybe in the general category of high bonding requirements, is there any way we can really look ahead towards the future and think of what would it take to attract more talent there, or provide opportunities, or work with our local community colleges or trade schools?
I'm working on that. I am working on a program to create capacity for graduates of our mentor protege program, more of a second level thing. It's not out yet, but I'm working on that, and it is around finding the gaps and figuring out partnerships and mentoring around those gaps. And one of those gaps that I'm examining are the bonding requirements and the barriers to those higher level bonds. When you start to get into the $5 and $10 million bonds, the cost to afford those can be the biggest barrier. So access to capital, along with experience and having the right mentors to show you how to do work that you've never done are the key. So I am working on it. So more to come as I develop this.
That's great to hear. I look forward to hearing more about that.
Go ahead.
I would also just like to add some additional perspective, and I appreciate Commissioner McDonald's viewpoint. I think one of the things that we're concerned about is that the length of time associated with this project. I mean, we're looking 5 years down the road. I mean, there's a lot of work in construction. And I do think that time is one of the assets that we have. If we see these continuing missed opportunities or a lack of an appropriate business, we do have the time to begin to say, what are those creative partnerships? Maybe it's working with the regional council of the state to look at funding for things that could offset the expense around bonding, or creative financial partner who is looking to have this strengthen their CRA investment as a bank. I mean, I just think there are things we can do 4 years from now that we can't do 4 months from now. We absolutely understand. But I don't think anybody sort of leaves here with a sense of comfort with a 0%. I mean, so I don't think anyone is promoting that. I think that's our reality. What can we do within now and the length of time of this contract to begin to sort of tilt that a little bit? So again, and that's the spirit, I think, of our feedback.
Go ahead.
Yes, and I appreciate what's been said by commissioners on this point. As someone who has worked construction for 30 years prior to becoming a commissioner, I would say that I appreciate what the port's done, because this is a very difficult thing to try to figure out and move forward with. And there are many players within the community here that are working on the same thing and would be happy to work with the port on it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further questions or discussion? Not, I'll call for a motion and second on the Executive Director's recommendation.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. And the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Well done, my friend. Requires some legislative policy changes on the